Welcome to my workshop. As you can see, it contains a number of rather ingenious inventions. I've studied them all with the help of my loyal assistant, the great woolly mammoth. Everything is arranged on these shelves. I have hundreds of machines here, along with the scientific principles that underlie them, the history of their development, and the stories of their inventors. So be my guest. Click on the shelves and explore my collection for yourself. Drying mammoth clothing has often created problems of shrinkage. I therefore hired a blacksmith to build a mammoth-shaped clothes dryer. During the construction, a thunderstorm swept overhead and a bolt of lightning hit the metal dryer. The blacksmith's tools flew through the air and attached themselves to the clothes dryer, dropping to the floor when the lightning had passed. Both blacksmith and mammoth were overwhelmed by the experience. Despite their placid temperament, mammoths are ill-suited to inside work. But their love of the outdoors makes them eager helpers in an agricultural environment. During one particularly heavy coconut harvest, mammoths were used to bend the palm trees so that the farmer could reach the nuts. However, problems arose when the mammoth became distracted and released the rope prematurely, distributing the coconuts, the farmer, and the mammoth far and wide. A recently discovered document proves the enormous intelligence of mammoths. A knight and his trusty mammoth were trying to rescue a beautiful princess trapped in a tower. The knight charged up the steps of the tower, only to find that the door was locked. Now the mammoth had a bright idea. Holding a tree trunk, he began to turn the tower. And to the knight's amazement, the tower began to screw itself into the ground, so the princess could leap to safety. After the runaway success of my pressure-sensitive burglar alarm, I thought of other ways in which the mammoth's sensing abilities could be put to use. I tried one experiment at the airport, using mammoths as metal detectors. Large items in luggage were easily located, but I fear the damage caused to passenger relations was irreparable. And so I turned to experiments with mammoth breath testers. The response to intoxicating fumes was instant, but the workforce needed to bring the mammoth round was enormous. Catching a mammoth involves stunning the beast with a gentle blow to its sensitive skull. However, raising the boulder high enough was quite a task, and not always successful. After much thought, I suggested replacing the tall towers with ramps made of earth. Not only did this require much less effort, it also increased the rate of mammoth capture. And once caught, the mammoth was eager and ready for work. The first use of mammoths for entertainment was in the famous Carousel experiment. Carrots were used to bribe the mammoths to turn one wheel. But even though the mammoths moved with alarming speed, the crowd still appeared bored. I therefore had the mammoths move to the larger wheel, and the chairs hung from the smaller one. This new arrangement proved to be much more exciting. I once came upon a delivery mammoth preparing to transport a screen. During a sudden gust of wind, the beast was perturbed to find himself lifted into the air, returning to the ground when the wind dropped. Inspired, I began my own experiments and found that a curved screen resulted in a smoother flight. Even so, screen deliveries remained somewhat unpredictable. I have often observed that the mammoth is capable of sleeping while standing up, sometimes sustaining its inactivity for days on end. While playing golf one day, I noticed that the grass growing in the shadow of a particularly inert mammoth was less green than that on the rest of the course. I decided to see whether images other than those of mammoths could be captured. Back in my yard, I paid a local family to stand in a line at the edge of my lawn. Having designed restraints for the younger members of the family, I had them return for the next 5 days, each time standing in the same places. The result was a perfect image of the family. Despite investing in a frame for my picture, however, it proved unsuitable for public exhibition. Firefighting mammoths have learnt to take in enough water to extinguish a blaze. However, getting the water out is more of a problem. But if the water-filled mammoth is placed in front of a sturdy post and firmly squeezed with a piston, the water is forcefully discharged. Unfortunately, the mammoth's powerful inhalation can create a serious hazard for onlookers. When my mammoth boarded a local ferry, the water seemed eager to join the animal on the raft. To my surprise, the raft sank. I solved this problem by building a wall around the raft, preventing the water from getting on board. Because we were still soaking wet when we got to the other side, I lit a large fire in our tent to dry us. Our journey, however, was to continue in a rather uplifting manner. When my mammoth boarded a local ferry, the water seemed eager to join the animal on the raft. To my surprise, the raft sank. I solved this problem by building a wall around the raft, preventing the water from getting on board. Because we were still soaking wet when we got to the other side, I lit a large fire in our tent to dry us. Our journey, however, was to continue in a rather uplifting manner. Due to the nature of their job, stunt mammoths require regular bathing. However, an unwilling mammoth can use its weight very effectively to avoid being dragged to the washtub. On one occasion, I witnessed an ingenious use of liquid soap and marbles. Once spread beneath the animal's bulk, they greatly reduced its resistance to washing, but sadly not its irritation. It was common practice for farmers near my laboratory to harvest lemons using a copper lance. I decided to help by equipping the workers' mammoths with some lightweight zinc rods which I had left over from an earlier experiment. I was surprised to see both workers and mammoths seized by invisible forces each time they speared a lemon. Although the farmers were shocked by this turn of events, I could foresee some useful applications for this new source of power. I found on my travels that mammoth milk was highly nutritious, though obtaining it was a dangerous task, the animals being notoriously touchy. I decided that some form of harness was needed. I used a system of wheels to lift the beast, and was surprised to find that the more wheels I ran the rope over, the easier it was to lift the mammoth. Although obtaining the precious milk was indeed easier, my mammoth harness was still in need of a few modifications. The bulky mammoth can move with surprising grace, as I discovered when one young animal borrowed my unicycle. The wheel's rotation aided the beast's natural balance. He became alarmed, however, when the massive wheel resisted his efforts to stop. A pond ended his dizzy trip, but the spinning wheel continued to throw mud far and wide long after the crash. The mammoth is not renowned for its abilities as a musician, so I was most surprised to witness 3 brave musicians using a mammoth to produce innovative music. A tightly strung tail produced an interesting twang. The animal's taut belly made an admirable boom, while a sharp tap with a hammer made the tusks chime quite pleasantly. The resulting music, enhanced by the mammoth's own trumpet call, could only be described as experimental. In the mountainous southern areas, Villagers communicated by using the age-old system of catapulting mammoth couriers from one village to the next. However, the system was threatened by a shortage of volunteer mammoths. In my new system, stones of varying size represented letters of the alphabet and were collected by a receiver. Unfortunately, the catapulter's aim was not always what it could have been. Although mammoths must wear shoes to protect their delicate feet, frequent shoe renewal can become a chore. In the search for longer-lasting footwear, the local blacksmith happened upon some pieces of iron of the right size and shape. However, after the first fitting of the new design, a powerful attraction between the shoes prevented all movement on the part of the wearer. When my mammoth boarded a local ferry, in the Mammoth Olympics, the crystal discus was a very popular event because of each throw's exciting conclusion. Spare discuses were prepared by my apprentice, but his initial enthusiasm soon gave way to delusions of miniature mammoths parading across the wall. The apparitions were followed by very real smoke and fire. The project lost me a workshop as well as a promising apprentice. I once came upon a forest mammoth who could both count and remember several numbers at a time. His enterprising owner, a logger by trade, would tap a tusk once for each log needed. A pull on his tail would send him off to bring back the requested number of trees. I decided to expand the mammoth's skills by teaching him addition. It was a mistake, however, to have him calculate our restaurant bill. Although he got the total amount right, he delivered the answer in logs. I recently came across an ingenious use of mammoth power. A cam-powered hammer cracked the eggs of an extinct bird, and a crank-powered shovel pushed away their shells. It appears the contraption was part of a new restaurant chain dedicated to serving omelets of mammoth proportions. I found on my travels that mammoth milk was highly nutritious. Though obtaining it was a dangerous task, the animal... I have often observed that the thing mammoths love most, with the possible exception of eating, is to sleep in the sun. I found that the heat absorbed by a mammoth during the day could be employed in providing a hot shower. A mammoth can similarly be used to pass heat to a cold bed, the only problem being removing the animal at bedtime. As a commercial concern, a mammoth makes a fine heated clothes press. It is essential, however, to use nimble employees for this task, as the mammoth may resume its original position at any time. The smell of a mammoth's sleeping quarters was notoriously bad. To control this problem, keepers trained their mammoths to sleep on mats, which had to be changed with some regularity. Moving a beast to change the foul-smelling fabric, however, was not an easy task. One day, I observed that a certain keeper had less trouble than others. I was astonished to see that by easing one end of a long pole beneath the creature's massive bulk, the keeper had constructed a simple lever that enabled him to lift the mammoth single-handed. In the mountainous southern areas, villagers communicated by using the age-old system of catapulting mammoth couriers from one village to the next. However, the system was threatened by a shortage of volunteer mammoths. In my new system, stones of varying size represented letters of the alphabet and were collected by a receiver. Unfortunately, the catapulter's aim was not always what it could have been. I have often observed that the thing mammoths love most, with the possible exception of eating, is to sleep in the sun. I found that the heat absorbed by a mammoth during the day could be employed in providing a hot shower. A mammoth can similarly be used to pass heat to a cold bed, the only problem being removing the animal at bedtime. As a commercial concern, a mammoth makes a fine heated clothes press. It is essential, however, to use nimble employees for this task, as the mammoth may resume its original position at any time. I have often observed that the mammoth is capable of sleeping while standing up, sometimes sustaining its inactivity for days on end. Despite their placid temperament, mammoths are ill-suited to inside work. But their love of the outdoors makes them eager helpers in an agricultural environment. During one particularly heavy coconut harvest, mammoths were used to bend the palm trees so that the farmer could reach the nuts. However, problems arose when the mammoth became distracted and released the rope prematurely, distributing the coconuts, the farmer, and the mammoth far and wide. A current of electrons from the battery's negative terminal moves across the transistor through the loudspeaker to the positive terminal. When a sound wave pushes the microphone diaphragm in, a weak signal of a few electrons flows into the microphone. This leaves a lot of holes in the base. Now, many electrons from the emitter can flow through the base and into the collector. A strong current flows to the loudspeaker. When the microphone diaphragm moves up, the electron flow reverses. Electrons flow from the microphone into the base. Here, they fill up the electron holes and block the flow of electrons from the emitter to the base. No current flows. When you push the button, you complete the electric circuit so that a current flows through the wire. This activates the electromagnet. As the armature moves toward the electromagnet, the hammer strikes the bell. The contacts open and the electromagnet is turned off. Now the spring pulls the armature back, resealing the contacts, and the cycle repeats.
Pressing the Set button depresses the diaphragm, readying the tester for a sample. As the driver blows into the tube, a pressure sensor is activated, light A comes on, and a timer starts. Light B comes on when a suitable sample has been taken. Pressing the Read button raises the diaphragm, drawing the sample into the fuel cell. Alcohol vapor in the sample causes the cell to produce a current. A microprocessor translates this current into a reading on the display, showing the amount of alcohol vapor in the sample.
When you want to calculate a sum, for example 56 times 9, you start by keying in the first number. The microprocessor stores the code for the number in its memory, and then sends the code to the display. You then press a key to tell the calculator what operation you want it to do. For example, multiplication. The code for this is also stored in the memory. You then input the second number, which is again stored and displayed. Finally, you press the equals key. This tells the microprocessor to look in the memory, perform the operation on the two numbers, and send the result to the display. When the seat belt is pulled slowly, the belt shaft turns freely inside the clutch. Tugging the seat belt rapidly, however, flings the toothed plate out and into the clutch's teeth. When the clutch is engaged, it is also turned with the belt. This movement brings the pawl into contact with the ratchet and prevents further movement of the shaft.
The gear wheel turns freely on the transmission shaft because it has a ball bearing at its center. Selecting a gear moves the collar along the shaft to the gear wheel. The collar's dog teeth lock into the gear wheel. The collar has no ball bearing at its center, so it turns the transmission shaft.
First, the drum charger gives the drum a negative static charge. The laser beam, turned on and off according to the pattern to be printed, changes the charges to positive on specific areas of the drum. The drum attracts negatively charged toner only where there is a positive charge. Positively charged paper pressed against the drum picks up the toner, creating the image. A sliding metal guard covers the disc surface when the disc is not in use. A lever inside the drive pushes the cover back when you insert the disc. A plastic shell protects the disc inside and keeps it flat. Inside the casing, a pair of gauze pads protect the disc, reducing friction and keeping the disc clean. A metal hub allows the motor to grip the disc securely and spin it at the right speed. First, the drum charger gives the drum a negative static charge. The laser beam, turned on and off according to the pattern to be printed, changes the charges to positive on specific areas of the drum. The drum attracts negatively charged toner only where there is a positive charge. Positively charged paper pressed against the drum picks up the toner, creating the image. As the engine runs, the water in the cooling system heats up. This in turn heats the wax, which expands, opening a valve. The water can then circulate around the cooling system. This stops the engine from overheating. As the water cools, the wax contracts, closing the valve. This prevents the engine from becoming too cold. A sliding metal guard covers the disc surface when the disc is not in use. A lever inside the drive pushes the cover back when you insert the disc. A plastic shell protects the disc inside and keeps it flat. Inside the casing, a pair of gauze pads protect the disc, reducing friction and keeping the disc clean. A metal hub allows the motor to grip the disc securely and spin it at the right speed.
Normal light falling on the display is polarized as it passes through the front polarizer. If a segment is off, the light is twisted as it passes through the liquid crystal layer. This means that it can pass through the rear polarizer. It is then reflected back by the mirror and the segment appears light. If the segment is on, however, the liquid crystal does not twist the polarized light. The light can no longer pass through the rear polarizer, and the segment appears dark.
Pushing the control lever opens a spring-loaded valve to allow compressed air into the drill. The air pushes one side of the diaphragm down and flows to the underside of the piston. The pressure of the air forces the piston upward. This squashes the air above the piston and tilts the diaphragm the other way. Air can now flow into the top of the cylinder where it forces the piston downward to strike the tool. As the piston falls, air escapes through the outlet. The diaphragm flips once again and the cycle repeats. When you push the button, you complete the electric circuit so that a current flows through the wire. This activates the electromagnet. As the armature moves toward the electromagnet, the hammer strikes the bell. The contacts open and the electromagnet is turned off. Now the spring pulls the armature back, resealing the contacts, and the cycle repeats. The rotor is held in place by the attraction between two of its permanent magnetic poles and the activated coils in the stator. When the activated coils switch off and a new pair switch on, the rotor turns by one step. By turning the coils on and off in sequence, the rotor can make a complete rotation. When current flows through the coil, the field of the magnet forces the right side of the coil down and the left side up. The coil rotates until it is vertical. At this point, there is no turning force, but the coil's inertia keeps it moving. As the coil passes the vertical position, the commutator reverses the direction of the current. The side of the coil that was moving up now moves down. The coil continues to rotate, with the commutator reversing the current every half turn.
In the induction stroke, the intake valve opens and the piston moves down, drawing in fuel and air. Then, in the compression stroke, the intake valve closes and the piston rises, squashing the fuel and air. In the power stroke, the spark plug fires to ignite the fuel and air. The powerful explosion forces the piston downward. Then, in the exhaust stroke, the exhaust valve opens and the piston rises, forcing the exhaust gases out of the cylinder. The cycle repeats, with the piston moving up and down many times a second. When the large front fan rotates, it draws in air. Some of this air flows along the bypass duct. The rest flows through the compressor blades, which raise the pressure of the air. The high-pressure air enters the combustion chambers, where burning kerosene heats it. The heat causes a huge rise in air pressure, so it powers the air at high speed through the rear of the engine. The hot air spins the fan turbines, which drive the engine. It then meets with the bypass air and speeds from the exhaust with tremendous force. When a free electron strikes a mercury atom, it knocks one of the atom's own electrons into a higher orbit. When the electron falls back, it releases a wave of ultraviolet light. This light energizes one of the electrons in a phosphor atom. On falling back, this electron releases a wave of visible light. The gear wheel turns freely on the transmission shaft because it has a ball bearing at its center. Selecting a gear moves the collar along the shaft to the gear wheel.
When you press a key, the damper moves away from the string. The key then forces the weapon upward, which swings the hammer against the string. As soon as you take your finger off the key, the damper drops down and stops the note.
When the pilot tilts the swash plates forward, the lift at the back of the rotor increases. This moves the helicopter forward. When the pilot tilts the swash plates backward, the lift at the front of the rotor increases, and so the helicopter moves backward. To raise the helicopter vertically, the pilot raises the swash plates. As the angle of the rotor blade increases, the helicopter rises. When the pilot lowers the swash plates, the helicopter descends. When you turn the laser on, the cathode produces electrons which move through the gas towards the anode. One of these electrons collides with a gas atom. This collision gives one of the atom's own electrons the energy to jump into a higher orbit. As the electron falls back into its original orbit, it loses its extra energy in the form of a tiny burst of light rays called a photon. When this photon hits another energized atom, the atom produces its own photon with waves exactly in step with the first. These photons hit more energized atoms, and a chain reaction starts. Growing numbers of photons bounce back and forth between the two mirrors, creating an intense beam. The beam builds in intensity until it bursts through the semi-silvered mirror as a laser beam.
A bolt can be turned with a simple blank key. Such a lock would not be very secure. With added tumblers, the lock can only be opened with a special key. The key must lift each tumbler by just the right amount to release the bolt pin. When the bolt is home, springs force the tumblers back down, locking the pin in place. The negative charge at the base of a storm cloud produces a positive charge in the ground. This can result in a dangerous and destructive lightning strike. Buildings can, however, be protected with a lightning conductor. Ions produced around the tip of the lightning conductor flow upward, reducing the electric field in the cloud, often preventing a lightning strike. If lightning does strike, it will tend to follow the path of the ions between the cloud and the lightning conductor and will flow safely to the ground.
A pulse of current fed to the coil in the detector head produces a magnetic field. The field induces currents in any nearby piece of metal. This current creates a magnetic field in the object, which in turn induces a current in the coil. The current is detected and an audible signal alerts the treasure hunter.
When there is no sound, the battery charges up the diaphragm and the fixed plate, but there is no electron flow through the resistor, and so no voltage between the output wires. When a sound wave pushes the diaphragm in, the plates can hold more charge, so electrons flow onto the diaphragm and away from the plate. The flow of these electrons through the resistor creates an output voltage across it, so electrons may flow along the output wires. When the sound wave pulls the diaphragm out, the plates can hold less charge, so electrons flow away from the diaphragm. This creates an electron flow in the opposite direction. When you press a button on the remote control to change television channel, for example, the microprocessor sends a pulse signal to the transmitter LED. The LED changes the pulses of electricity into pulses of infrared light, which travel across the room. At the receiving end, a photodiode in the television changes the infrared pulses back into electrical pulses. A microprocessor in the television interprets the pulses and changes the channel. The operator can teach the robot directly by moving its arm. The robot's microprocessor senses the movements of the arm and records them so it can repeat them on demand. The robot can also be taught by sending instructions directly to its microprocessor using a computer. When you dive, the pressure of the surrounding water pushes the diaphragm inward. This pushes on a lever which opens the air inlet valve. As air flows in from the tank, it pushes the diaphragm back out, closing the valve. The air is now at the same pressure as the water. When you breathe in, the suction pulls the diaphragm inward and the valve opens to let in more air. When you breathe out, your breath pushes open the When you dive, the pressure of the surrounding water pushes the diaphragm inward. This pushes on a lever which opens the air inlet valve. As air flows in from the tank, it pushes the diaphragm back out, closing the valve. The air is now at the same pressure as the water. When you breathe in, the suction pulls the diaphragm inward and the valve opens to let in more air. When you breathe out, your breath pushes open the exhaust valve and bubbles out into the water. When the seat belt is pulled slowly, the belt shaft turns freely inside the clutch. Tugging the seat belt rapidly, however, flings the toothed plate out and into the clutch's teeth. Light hitting atoms in the p-type layer freeze electrons. These electrons are attracted to the n-type layer. Electrons from deeper in the p-type layer replace those which are lost. As more light rays hit the cell, electrons flow around a circuit as an electric current before returning to the bottom of the p-type layer.
To make a recording, you press the record button. This pushes the record playhead against the tape, presses the tape between the capstan and the pinch wheel, and starts the motor. The erase head wipes out any recordings already on the tape. Signals from the microphone cause current to flow in the coils inside the record playhead. This creates a magnetic field. The field changes in intensity, copying the intensity of the sound waves you want to record. The changing field magnetizes the tape, making the recording. To make a local telephone call, you dial the code of your local exchange, followed by the number of the telephone that you want to reach.